Welcome back to Choose, Sip, Repeat. Today's guest is another dear friend of mine. I could, in a way, say he's responsible for me being here today. He encouraged me to leave a job close to 20 years ago to come work for the restaurant group that he worked for at the moment. And that arguably altered my path and led me here today. I was just a diamond in the rough working at Charleston's out south at the time. He has inspired me in many ways professionally for a long time. I'm happy to welcome Sir Jared Jordan.
Sir's my dad.
No, I just thought it was really funny, like as if you had been, knighted or something.
Not that I remember.
No.
So, but it could have happened. It could have happened. So
It's possible.
it is.
Welcome, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. It's so nice to talk to you. So I wanted to start off with just, a handful of questions that will help people kind of understand who you are and where you've come from and your ranks within the industry kind of situation.
Okay.
So is Tulsa your hometown?
No, I was born in Muskogee. Grew up there, which is about 40 minutes away from Tulsa. I went to college in Shreveport and then moved back to Oklahoma to wrap up school before I went to grad school. And I ended up just moving to Tulsa. 9/11 had just happened, so it was right after that. So, but I was trying to figure out what I was going to do in my life, and so I moved to Tulsa.
Where was your very first industry job?
First industry job would have been at Miss Addie's in Muskogee. They had a tea room that served lunch, and then a pub in the evening that did, I guess, what you would consider to probably be the closest thing we had to fine dining in Muskogee. So.
Okay. And what brought you to Tulsa?
My best friend was moving up here from Tahlequah, and we'd been roommates before, and I didn't want to live in Muskogee. He didn't want to live in Muskogee, and we were both going to Northeastern at the time. So he was like, "Hey, I'm getting an apartment." And I was like, "Let's move to Tulsa." So
who do I know this person?
His name was Nick Crossland.
I don't know if I know him.
Nick was in my wedding, but he passed away last year. So but
gosh, I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
I did not know that. I'm sorry. Okay. And so where is your current place of employment? What are you doing now?
Right now I work at the Summit Club. I've been here for 7 years, and I'm the CEO of the organization. Yeah, you are. I started out as the general manager in 2017, and I've been here ever since. And we've done quite a bit of change around here in that time. So
most recently, when did you do the remodel?
During COVID.
Yes, during COVID. So what inspired you to get into this industry? Was there a moment in time, or was it just kind of like you fell into it, or?
I wanted to bartend, and that's kind of where I started, I started in the dish pit actually, and I wanted to bartend, and there was a bar opening, and so they gave it to me. I had just turned 21 at the time. So I thought that was really cool. I thought I was really cool, making a really awesome
like maybe you were a big deal.
Yeah. Like making a really cool flirtini in 1999 seemed like a big deal back then. But I was really lucky early on. The manager of Miss Addie's was a lady named Virginia Eggleston, and she had been trained at one of the original Ruth's Chris. And so that style of service was considered to be pretty much top notch at that point.
Elaborate on that style of service. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, it's just full service fine dining where, you're making sure that you're dotting all the I's, crossing all the T's. Sure. And everything's clear. It's just traditional fine dining service, but really executed well. And so I learned a lot from Virginia. I thought I learned more than I did, because when I moved to Tulsa, they didn't have a bar job open at my first place of employment. So they had to put me on the floor as a server, and it became very clear very quickly that was not my strong point in the restaurant.
Service?
Yes. So
that shocks me. I have a hard time picturing that.
Life has a funny way of figuring things out. This was at the chalkboard. I started there in 01 and or early 02, and so our mutual friend Tracy was working there, and I had applied for a job, and after I had done the application, I ended up going out with some of the staff that night, just because I knew a couple of them, and I met this girl at the party, and it turned out she was the owner's daughter, and Shannon.
Shout out to Shannon.
Shout out to Shannon, my birthday buddy. we hit it off. Shannon was kind of my first friend I made when I moved here, and she actually works with me here now. So
I love how it's come full circle.
Oh yeah.
Yes. So you have a lot of the OGs from the chalkboard days.
Some people like to say I collect them.
Yes.
But no, so I'm, that speaks to kind of my philosophy on how I run things. I really enjoy, I think the thing that I love the most about this industry is the people. That's what got me from day one. To answer your original question was, I really liked the sense of community and closeness of family that you kind of got out of the whole thing. And for me, being a young person at about 21, and this is a long time ago, so the industry was a lot different back then. But having that safety net of friends and coworkers and just people to kind of grow up with was really, really beneficial to me in my career trajectory. And I, to be real honest, at that place, because you worked there for me.
Yes.
I've worked with probably some of the best professionals I've ever worked with. And there have been so many people that have come out of that place and things that sprung off of that place that are now, they've got their own places. And that to me is really the true sign of being good at hospitality, is being able to pass it on to other people to do it as well. So.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say, if I had to sum you up, it hit me when you said that you were not particularly good at service, which I said struck me as odd, but I would then say that you are like the coach. Not all coaches can play the game, but it takes a strong leader and someone who to be able to see things well and execute it and have a plan and a backup plan. And you were always a great manager.
Well, and I wasn't a terrible server forever. There was one particular night, I'll never forget this. I was in the weeds and I didn't have that many tables. I think I was probably hungover. I had a single it was at table 7B at the chalkboard.
I can picture it now.
One guy sitting by himself, and he got mad at me because I didn't put his toothpicks on the side plate with a lemon. He was watching me over, where I was getting him some extra lemon, and that I used tongs that had presumably touched somebody else's lemons or what have you.
Uh-huh.
And so that rattled me a little bit. I had some other stuff going on, and the owner, one of the owners happened to be there that night and observed just the absolute shit show that my section was turning into. And, and it was at that point that the event director and a couple of the other servers there who I'd become friends with pulled me aside and said, "Hey, you're going to have to figure this out real quick or you're not going to be working here anymore." And
oh my gosh.
I appreciated the candor. That really does always mean a lot to me, is good feedback. But ultimately I had to figure it out, and I had to figure it out quickly. And, I had some good, again, friends that worked there with me that taught me the ropes. And, now it's amazing just the things you can see on the dining room floor. And I will always be the first to admit, I am, just like you said, not the best player on the field, usually when it comes to restaurant hospitality, but my favorite position is to be the coach.
I think you do it well.
And there are times when it's necessary to get in and fight with everybody and dig into the weeds with everybody. And I love the thrill of that. Like nothing excites me more than a dining room with 125 people, knowing that we've got tight turns. And that to me is an adrenaline rush.
Right.
What I don't like is, Tuesday night, 10 people, servers calling in asking if we're busy and
can they be stuff. First cut or even coming in at all?
You know this. I always made them close.
Yeah.
But
yes. Yeah. For those of you who don't know, the Chalkboard is a restaurant that is in the bottom of the Ambassador Hotel, and fine dining. Well, I don't know what it is today because I haven't been back since new ownership has taken it over. However, back in our day, it was a fine dining restaurant, and show nights were kind of the nights.
Yeah.
PAC was popping. We were busy.
Tulsa was a different place back then.
Right.
Downtown was, not considered to be, I think the perception was that it was not safe at night. Most of us lived down here because it was cheap.
Right.
But, what sprung out of that was, you look at downtown now and all the positive things that have, Elliot's done with it and all the other independent restaurants. That's the cool thing about Tulsa, is that everything here is pretty much original north of 41st Street.
Yeah.
I think with the exception of the Olive Garden at Utica Square, which is a beautiful new Olive Garden. And when you're there, your family there too. But I think that with the exception of that, this is a really independent restaurant town and a foodie town too. And I think Tulsa had to figure that out. But it really, when people are like, oh, Tulsa's going to be the next Nashville or this, that, or the other, I always kind of say, no, Nashville is what it is. Austin's what it is. I think Tulsa is going to be kind of Tulsa and do what Tulsa does. Having been fortunate enough to be a part of all this in the limited amount that I have, is really exciting to me because when I see it now, there's a really thriving restaurant business here, even despite what happened in 2020. And you've got some really sharp people that love food, that love hospitality, that love new ideas. And I that's why I've never left, is there's just always been this cool sense of adventure here. And then I met my wife.
Yeah. Sarah's made you stay a little bit grounded. Yes.
I hope so.
Yes. And those little babies you've got too. They don't help.
Yes. For those of you listening, I live in a house with my wife, an almost 8-year-old daughter and an almost 4-year-old daughter that may be on the no-fly list. So
they're great. Okay, so speaking of the family, how'd you guys ring in the new year? Were you working or?
No, so it was funny. This year I didn't work New Year's for the first time since probably 2000, with the exception of 2020.
Right.
I haven't been off on New Year's since 2010. And this year, we were staffed well enough to where each of the managers could take off one of the major holidays of the season. And
that's awesome.
Which is great. And I chose New Year's because it's just amateur night to me. So
right.
I went home. We have this tradition at our house with the girls. We have fancy dinner some nights. So everybody actually gets dressed up.
Yes.
We cook dinner, set the table. I think it's important to teach kids that stuff.
Agreed.
So we had a fancy dinner. The kids drank some sparkling cider out of martini glasses and thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And then at about 10:30, I woke up on the couch and went to bed.
Yeah. Oh, so here's a little tip that I learned. One of my coworkers taught me is you go on YouTube and you find
the ball drop from
the previous year.
Yeah.
Yes. And I did that. So we counted down the ball drop at 7:59 and then off to bed they went. And then Trey and I stayed up for the rest of the night. But yes, it was.
We didn't make it to New Year's. We did drink a really badass bottle of champagne. I've been sitting on for a while. And that's always fun. But yeah, so that was, we rung it in with a little food, a little wine. Didn't go out,
there's no need.
There's no need. I've got, with 3 girls at home, I have enough drama. Right. I don't need to go out. So,
right. I'm familiar.
Yes.
So, Jared has 2 daughters and I have 3.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got a basketball team.
For the
right.
I mean, at least a 4-square team.
Right.
With an alternate. So,
okay. So, I think that this was actually Trey's question that he suggested for me to ask you, which I think is, I think it's really cute because I love the friendship that you two have. And he wanted to know, so most people who know you professionally, they see you wearing the suit and the CEO of the summit, but I know you to be a very big rock and roll fan. So he is curious to know, what is your favorite 90s band?
Oh, I've been on a huge 90s kick lately, and I don't know what happened. I was just, Nirvana came on one day and I was driving down the road and I just went all in on grunge. It's probably a tie. It would probably be a tie between the Stone Temple Pilots, which is not everybody's favorite pick. And I love grunge and I love Nirvana and all those guys. The other one would be Oasis, because I think that Oasis is just such a fantastic band that did such cool stuff. So
I didn't listen to a lot of rock growing up, but I will say Oasis was one of the ones that I definitely
They were the greatest band in the world for a short period of time.
Yeah.
But no, I think that that's a really tough thing to say, because there were so many different types of music in the 90s. It was just such a cool time to be alive and such a great music scene. But if I had to pick like Desert Island, 2 albums that I could take from the 90s, it would be Stone Temple Pilots, Tiny Music, for songs from the Vatican Gift Shop, and the other one would be Oasis, What's the Story, Morning Glory. So
love it. I love that you can not only, like, you're so specific in your favorites. It's That's awesome. Well, if you all listened to the first episode with Trevor Tack, you knew that the topic of the conversation then was the future of the industry and its current and past struggles. And I asked him to be a guest on that show just because of wanting to get the perspective of a back of the house, a chef, the kitchen. I thought it would be great to have your perspective because you have worked in the industry in so many different facets. You know, we just already have discussed that you were a server, bartender, manager. You were also a wine rep for a short period of time as well. So looking through the lens of so many different perspectives on front of the house, you know, I thought that you would be a really great person to ask those same that same topic, but just like I said, the front of the house
different perspective.
Yeah.
I think that'd be great. Just to give Trevor Tack a shout out. What's up, buddy? Sarah, did you know that we used to be roommates?
So I have to say that Trey and I had a bet on whether or not you would bring that up.
I did.
Yes, he was like, you know, he's going to bring that up. Yeah, that's hilarious. Sidebar, Jared says that to every single person.
But mostly my wife.
Yes. So like what specifics do you think that have changed? I mean, I can tell you from my perspective how things have changed since I've been in the industry, but I'm really interested in learning what your perspective is. And,
I think that I've seen the tides turn a couple of times, really. I mean, I can almost even, this dates me a little bit, but I could almost name different eras of the business in my mind at this point. Because, when I started late 90s, there wasn't a lot of food information out there. If you were a foodie, there was Food and Wine Magazine, Epicurious, Test Kitchen, but you had to buy books and really seek that stuff out.
Yeah.
If you were into it. I was very fortunate. My parents were both foodies. And so I grew up in a foodie household. I mean, I remember one of my best friends growing up, and his dad and my dad were really close. And, weekends where they would do like an entire whole beef Wellington just to see if they could do it.
Right.
And, so I'm like 5 years old eating beef Wellington. And, my dad would take me, to the Polo Grill, Summit Club, Bodine's, in the 80s when I was a kid, because he wanted me to learn how to act in a restaurant.
Right.
There's some funny stories about that too, but no, so I would almost say that when I got into it, everything was real pedestrian at the time. Wine was really pedestrian. The craft cocktail movement had started on the coasts, and you were starting to see more fun drinks. And I mentioned the Flirtini earlier. I probably made 5 million of those between 98 and 2001. But, that was when people were starting to say, okay, hey, this is cool. Fine dining doesn't have to be stuffy, and it can be fun. Right. And so that was kind of an interesting, place to be, because it was almost like we were at the beginning of something. And when I moved up here, I realized just what a small fish I was in a big pond up here. And it's, so I get up here, and this is the day of, because when I started out, you had to work breakfast before you could work lunch, and you had to work lunch before you could work dinner.
Oh, wow.
And that was before you ever even got considered for a bar shift. So, I got off breakfast pretty quickly. That was a necessity because A, I didn't like mornings at the time, and B, you didn't make as much money. Although back then servers did well too.
Right.
But when I got onto my lunch shifts, this is like the prime time of the 3 martini lunch. I mean, people drinking a lot. During the middle of the day, I would have tables that would spend more at lunch than they would at dinner. And so I really feel like I learned a lot the first couple of years here, just seeing this isn't New York City, and it's not, San Francisco or anything, but I was around people for the first time that cared as much about this stuff as I did. And, we're all just big nerds if you think about it.
Right.
I mean, your husband's a nerd about food. I'm a nerd about wine. I play with Legos,
while listening to Oasis.
Yeah. But I felt I fit in. And I was never one of those people that didn't feel like I fit in, but it was all of a sudden, I was really around people that I wanted to be around, and I didn't even know what that was until I moved here. Yeah. And so, that area of the industry, things have changed significantly since then. And we'll talk about COVID separately, but, labor, staffing, the way that you can behave within four walls.
That has drastically changed.
And I've everything that's happened to me along the way, I've tried to apply to being a better leader as I've moved into leadership positions, particularly when I owned the bar, because that, as you well know, you owned a restaurant, that sucks.
Yeah,
it's an adventure and it sucks.
Right.
But so back then, what was a typical week? You probably worked 60 to 80 hours and you didn't complain about it.
That's right.
Conversely, you were probably taking home anywhere between $1,000 and $1,500 in cash. These days when servers are like, I don't make any money.
I don't know if we want the back of the house people to hear that.
I just don't understand how they don't. Like, get out there and make your money, man.
Right.
In fact, we were all doing so well at one point that it was like we would go out to eat fancy dinners at nice places more than our customers. But because we were exploring all this too. So I think that our generation were people who were really exploring this and trying to put a stamp on it. And, this is really around the time that you started seeing the rise of the celebrity chef. And that actually does factor in a lot to how the front of the house has changed, because when I was first in the business, I remember the first time I saw a celebrity chef on TV. Trevor and I lived together and we were watching Michael Chiarello. I think it was Napa Style. He had a show that, was really about food and wine, and it was not an awesome show. Michael Chiarello was a great chef, but it was more interesting than anything we could see. And then the bomb dropped. We all read Bourdain's book, and I remember we both finished it about the same time. And I was like, oh my God, this is what we do. Right. And also we weren't as cool as Tony Bourdain was. And so we had to be cooler. So we spent a good part of our formative years modeling our behavior after a degenerate, the best degenerate that ever lived. But, sure. But, and it was just exciting. New food things were happening. Wine was really starting to become a big deal, but the celebrity chef really changed the aspect of the front of the house, because the pressure had always been on service in the front of the house to put on the show. Right. And to be real honest, everything that we do is very structured. At least you've worked for me. You know that I'm very structured, and there's a way to do things and a way not to do it. But having that added development, especially as a manager, to where the chef could come out and talk to tables and take some pressure off the dining room, really changed the game for us. And, I'm not a believer in front of the house, back of the house BS. Are there arguments all the time? Did I get in a fight with Chef Bill before Christmas? We do it once a year, and we had it. But at the end of the day, everybody is part of a machine working together, and you can't have this offset. So I embraced that. I was working with two of the best chefs in town.
Arguably, yes.
But seeing that those people could come out, interact with folks, really, changed the game for us, because it almost took some pressure off the front of the house. We would focus more on service, and then, the manager and the chef, or the owner and the chef, they would do the song and dance for the customer. And that's when dinner almost kind of became theater to a certain point. It used to be a really nice meal, great service, blah, blah, blah. But then all of a sudden you had to become an actor. I've always said that what we do is like work. You go to work every day, you're on a stage. Right. You're literally looking over a roster and saying, okay, here are the plays tonight. Here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to execute it. And you try like hell not to screw any of it up. So, and so back then, did everybody party more? I don't know about more. Was it more out in the open? Yeah. I think that you have to talk about, regardless of, being male or female, that there was a lot of bad behavior going on, particularly from men in the industry 20 years ago.
It was just tolerated. It was just part of the,
and it was tolerated and
the shift.
Real honestly, I always like to tell people, because they're like, oh my God. And I was like, we've all been a part of it. Everybody I know, was either on the light giving end or the light receiving end, it was a different time back then. But I think it's necessary to point out that one of the things that has changed the most is that respect to each individual is a deal breaker. If you don't have it, for me, you have to be able to not have things like that infecting your staff, because you're really here to put on a show. And if you've got all these cancers running around and problem people doing problem things, ultimately that's going to affect the guest.
Right.
So that's just something that I think needs to be brought up, and that's been positive change.
Absolutely.
It's one of the interesting statistics that you see here and now is that, back in my day, shake my cane. Back in my day, it was a predominantly male industry, particularly in the kitchen.
But even front of the house too.
Even front of the house. And particularly when it came to management.
Especially fine dining.
Yeah. I mean, guys ran the show. And now when you look at the OSU School of Business and everything that's coming out of, their hospitality school, I think that they're graduating close to or above 60% females are coming out of the hospitality program. And that's the future of the industry. I really do think so. Females are much better at hospitality than males are. They're more even keeled. They're less likely to get into crazy mischief. In fact, I have one male manager in a team of probably 12.
And that would be Derek Shanklin.
Derek, who is my right-hand man, my work wife and my best friend, and the guy who really makes things run here at the Summit Club.
Right.
Derek and I have worked off and on for 20 years. Derek taught me how to wait tables.
Yes.
And so he's the first person I called when I came here, knowing the insurmountable task that I was up against, was Derek. In fact, it was kind of weird. I was sitting in McNelly South. Derek was managing there at the time. And I was like, God, what have I gotten myself into? I really got to get somebody in the event department. And I look up and Derek's there and I was like, Shanklin, come talk to me. And
just the man I needed to see.
And, we've been here 7 years, and Derek has gone from being, an event manager here to the GM. And, for those of you that can't see or don't know Derek's African-American. And I take a lot of pride in the fact that Derek is one of the few Black GMs in town, and that we continue to try to diversify our staff that way. And I think that that's the big positive you've seen in the last 20 years is that, there's a lot more tolerance, diversity, and thought. Mental health is a huge thing to me in this business, mostly because we suffered the bad end of the stick on that. 80-hour weeks, and me, I'll be candid, drug use, alcohol, partying all night, never missing a shift.
Never missing a shift.
Never missing a shift. And just ultimately, you really have to look at it and go, why the hell did we do this for this long?
We tortured ourselves.
And you mentioned I was a wine rep for a few years. I completely broke down and got out of the industry. Like I mentally just cracked.
Yeah.
And said, to hell with this. I'm going to go be a sommelier. And so I got out for a while. And then when I got back in about 5 years later, because I'd help people open certain restaurants.
Yeah.
And it was funny. You guys mentioned Soche in Trevor's episode, and you and I had a very strange experience at Soche in that
it was an interesting turn of events for sure.
It was. I think that you've really got to think about this as being Trevor's fault.
I would agree.
Trevor had hired me to work there, and I did not know that Christina was not going to be working there.
This is true.
And so I had gone in on a Sunday just to kind of get the lay of the land, see, what the restaurant looked like, things that needed to be done. And Christina came in. She goes, "What are you doing here?" I was like,
yeah, our sweet dear friend Trevor really dropped the ball. In fact, that almost completely, that turn of events, and amongst some other things that we care not to get into because we've moved past it, almost ended he and I's friendship for the long term.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like I said,
that's
moved
showbiz,
on.
baby.
It's showbiz. It's the industry,
It is. And, quite honestly, we were all so dumb back then. That restaurant probably could have made it and should have made it.
It should have made it.
We were doing things back then that I've looked at menus and gone, wow, we were really ahead of the game for, a couple of 26-year-old kids. 27, you guys were 21, 22, 23.
I think I was 24, maybe.
And what a time to be alive. But yeah. So I'd gotten out after that experience and just was, because I ended up having to fire my best friend at the end of the day and my other best friend.
Right.
And that's how that whole thing ended. And
it was a very bold turn of events.
within a short couple of months. And that's just how the industry works sometimes. And so I just kind of said to hell with this for a while. And then I'd been out, doing other things for several years, and this spot came open. I wanted to open a bar. Craft cocktails were really taking off at the time.
Mexico was great.
It was. I miss Mexico.
I do too.
I miss what Mexico stood for. We were probably the worst bar in Tulsa that made some of the best drinks. And
I agree with that statement.
We were a really upscale dive bar with quirky people that worked there. But,
which made it added to its character, and it was great.
I group text with all my people from Mexico today. We were making fun of each other about different things, and half of those people are managing other restaurants now, and they were just hipster millennial kids that taught me a lot about millennials, to be real honest, and to speak to the change in the industry. It was your generation that really woke the rest of us up and said, "Hey, we don't have to do this anymore." Right. And me, I'm still a hard ass on everything. And I'm like, I think the most I worked in a week this holiday was 60 hours, and that's light. I've put in 120 before. I know Derek worked harder than I did and deserves the time off he's got right now. But, that was really when it shifted. And to speak to that, then we had this really great from 2010 to 2019 era, and especially in Tulsa, new things popping up, new ideas, great new chefs. I mean, between Hodges Bend, Valkyrie, Continental doesn't need to be, it was the first.
Right.
And Mexico, you had some really great craft cocktail bars. And I always
really great.
Yeah. And I mean, really great. I mean, we were featured in some national publications. Everybody was. But my favorite thing to talk about that era was people always thought that Aaron and Noah and I hated each other because we had competing businesses and couldn't be further from the truth. I love that. In fact, I helped open Hodges with Noah. So,
yeah, I remember that.
And so, there was this really great 10 years where things were just cool and everybody was having a good time. We were learning new things. I got my sommelier in 2016. So I had gone full in on learning about wine. And that was a big accomplishment for me because that's not easy to do. And there were about 6 or 7 of us that all got certified. And in fact, a few of us were going to sit for the advanced exam, but I had a kid, and that ended that.
It's amazing how they shift things in your life.
I would rather have the kid than the pen. But but no, and so then I got to a point with Mexico. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do anymore because I owned the bar. I didn't work there every night necessarily. Had a great crew. We were doing some neat things. And that's about the time that the club came calling. And I have a lot of familiarity with this, the Summit Club, which is a private club here in Tulsa. Have been a member for a long time. Had served on the board. Really loved the place, but it had gone downhill. One of the better GMs they ever had for a long time had retired, and it didn't go so well after that for a bit. And they asked me if I was interested in doing this, and I said sure. And didn't know if I wanted to or not because I was like, a private club, that's not cool. But I do like this place, and I wanted to go create something.
Right.
And so I dove in. This has been one of the most challenging things I've ever done because we did a $6.5 million remodel that started 2 weeks before the pandemic.
I mean, arguably good timing on your part.
Yes, we did avoid a lot of inflation, and no one was in the building while we were making all that noise. But right. But it was also the first time I hadn't worked at night in God knows how long. I mean, it was very strange. We had a newborn, but that's story to be told. I really learned a lot about taking care of people at that point. And that's where I head to where the business is now, is that people that are really good at what we do care about their customer, or in our case, the member, but you also have to ultimately care about your team. This is a people business. All
the way around.
And, when you were alluding to earlier that I'm a good coach, I've always been a people person. I can drive people to do things that they're not aware that they can do. And that's what I take a lot of pride in, is getting the best out of people. Even though they're probably better than me than most of it. So, I'm really good at barking orders, although I don't yell anymore. I've given that up. I had a change of heart about 6 years ago and decided to start speaking softly and let Derek be the bad cop. But,
Right.
But so, yeah, it's that has changed, a lot. My perspective on it, I suppose, is that it used to be, oh, it's all about putting out the greatest food and doing your best. And that's all part of it. I mean, I work in a place where, we're expected to be perfect 99% of the time at everything we do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a lot of pressure, particularly for the staff. But, and staffing's hard these days. Talk to generations. I was talking about how great the millennials were. The generation now is unmanageable. I mean, they've you've seen that sign. It's like become ungovernable. Well, that's just what they are. And I don't mean to stereotype Gen Z, but, I don't think that they would have hacked it in our day. I've had bartenders tell me that they can't work at night. And, so
I don't know where they plan on bartending then.
But self-taught bartenders, by the way. But no, so, there have been a lot of paradigm shifts, but I think that the most positive thing has been that the public now understands what is good. And so that's pushing us to do greater things than we've ever done. I mean, some of the food that these chefs are putting out these days and some of the ideas on events that we've been doing. And, I work with another great chef in town here, Bill Lyle, who has been here with me for 7 years. And Bill is one of my favorite people I've worked with next to, Trevor, Paul, and those guys. And, just to see the envelope get pushed, what we're doing these days. I mean, stuff your husband does.
Right.
We would have never thought of this 15 years ago.
No, because social media and the access to knowledge is so readily available that it wasn't that way back then.
Well, it's a double-edged sword, though. So
totally. Let's talk about review culture and how it is today. Like that.
If there's anybody out there that has some startup capital that wants to start Yelp for customers,
or for managers
written by restaurant managers,
yes.
I'm here for you. People believe everything they read on the internet. And I think that social media has really been a bad thing for society. I think that people feel entitled. People think they know too much. And quite frankly, we're as professional in this industry, at least at our level, as people who work in oil and gas or the legal profession are. I mean, people seek us out and fine dining places or places like other places in Tulsa. Elliot's got a lot of great restaurants, Justin, those guys, that, they seek those places out to eat because it is the best. And it's like when you go out to hire someone for a service, I would never walk into my attorney's office and tell them how to litigate. Right. I would never walk into an oil and gas guy's office, tell them where to drill.
Right.
Why can you come into my space and tell me that I'm doing it wrong?
Right.
And I think that that's part of what's gotten lost in the last 20 years is that the theater has gotten to be that the actors are now the audience.
Right.
And they're bad actors. And you can talk about COVID. I mean, the other big change we've seen is, COVID happened, everybody was pent up. And then when everybody opened back up, just the paradigm shift in behavior.
From customers.
I've seen hostesses get yelled at. I think that the 2:00 happy hour contributes something to this as well, because we've noticed that happy hour, used to start at 4, 3 if you were in the industry and you were off that day. But I mean, now it's it's typical to see, people coming in at 2:00 and having drinks till 6 before they go sit down in the dining room and at some point make an ass of themselves.
Right.
And I think that the thing that I've learned the most from COVID and all that was that it's taking what the millennials said a step further. We're not here to put up with that shit. We're here to put out a perfect or near perfect product that you cannot produce. Sit back and enjoy it and not, you're allowed to critique everything. That's everyone's God-given right. But you're not allowed to tell us how to do it or how it should be done, because it's like Willy Wonka said, we are the dreamers of the dreams. So,
right. Well, I just feel like manners, it seems to have been tested. Yep. I mean, you're right. You critique it all you want, but back in the day, it was like we waited until we got into the car to say, well, that steak wasn't the best I've ever had, or whatever, or the service was lacking, or whatever.
You can gently say something to a manager, and usually they won't assume that you're doing anything wrong. They'll try. I mean, we want to make people happy. That's hospitality.
Oh no, absolutely.
It's difficult when people don't allow you to do so.
Right.
And that's where I think I come from. And this is not to say that everybody's a bad actor. There are tons of great customers here in town and people that truly love what we do and people who kept a lot of us afloat during that time.
Sure.
And that needs to be mentioned as well. But that's been the biggest shift for me, I think, lately. It's just been behavior. And I don't really know how we fix that. The other big thing is, everything costs more. And there's going to be a great correction in the market. I think, we're going to have to, it's weird for us because we use the Danny Meyer method because we're a private club. People make a living wage. Mm-hmm. Tips are optional, but our servers do great, but they take home a paycheck every 2 weeks. They don't have to work for tips. In the public sector, that model is not going to last. And now conversely, and I'm just going to get off on a soapbox here. When I go in to buy a donut, they expect to get tipped. When I go, like anytime I see a square, I'm like, I'm not shopping here because why do I need to tip somebody for something that has never been tipped for when these people wouldn't tip us to begin with when we were making $2.13. So, so I think that there's going to have to be a huge shift. People are going to have to understand, like when I was a kid, it's expensive to go out and have a nice meal. All the things that go into what we do are expensive and you can't do it at home by yourself. And people are more expensive. There's a huge correction that needs to happen in that. I think that staff's always been undervalued here and we're trying to make parity between back and front of the house here a thing right now. So that's where we're headed, I think.
So how do you, outside in the public sector, how do you see the future of the industry and what direction is it moving? Like what if you had to put on
I think that upscale casual is going to continue to dominate. I think that concepts are just going to be open to everybody because you have to be a bit more, you have to be more for everyone when you're in the public sector. Conversely, I think that you are going to see less restaurants because with the amount of staff we don't have anymore and the lack of kind of pipeline of that coming through, you aren't going to have a great experience everywhere you go. So the people that are best at this will be the ones that survive. So you will see better restaurants, probably more expensive, putting out a better product, but less of them.
What are your thoughts on the service charge that is becoming more popular?
I have to plead the fifth on that because we at the club, and this is how private clubs work, we have a house charge. Mm-hmm. We don't call it a service charge because the house charge goes to pay everybody. Service would implicate that it's the server. And this is actually a legality thing. But I think that you've got to make a decision one or the other. It's either got to be tipping is required or optional, or there's a service fee that covers the expenses. You can't just start adding things and putting them in there without talking to your people about it because people don't understand the business as it is. And, every restaurateur is out to screw somebody in somebody's mind. So, to me, I think that the big thing is that, we're going to have to figure it out. I mean, even Danny Meyer in New York City, if you go to Gramercy Tavern, awesome place, they do not allow tipping there. And everybody that works there loves it because, their hospitality group's great. I just read a book by one of their guys from 11 Madison Park called Unreasonable Hospitality. It was the best book I've read this year, but really good book. So, yeah, I don't know where we're going, but it's gonna have to, I almost think, be developed by us, put out by us. And if everybody doesn't adopt it, that's the big problem because people will seek out the way they like things. For me, I think living wage is the way to go. I think that things should be more expensive. You pay $80 for a fillet at a restaurant. And yeah, that's astronomical. But again, you heard me say it earlier, that's showbiz, baby. You don't get to drive a Lamborghini for $10. So,
no, fair.
So I think that's where we're headed. I think that there's going to be a cultural shift in, how people expect to be treated in this industry. And I think back to what I was saying earlier about the rise in females really kind of taking over as the administrators of this. I think that you're going to see hospitality improve because, there are soft skills that some people possess that have never been applied. And, with, let's just say it, women not having been in control very much in the past, there's a whole new world of exploration to do out there. People with ideas that never got to speak up about it. So I'm excited to see that.
Yes, I am too. And I'm excited about your opinion on it too.
Yeah, no, you can ask all the great ladies that have or still work for me right now. It's, they do just as much work as we do. And they're usually the ones that are, driving us home at the end of the night after we go to the bar too. So,
Fair.
But
well, speaking a little bit more personally, do you have, with it being the start of the new year, do you have any professional goals or plans for this coming year?
Yeah, I've got personal and professional. I stopped biting my nails 2 weeks ago.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, and I've made it, and it's really weird. I think it's just done. But personally or professionally, I am. We're really concentrating on culture improvement and finding more fun ways to do the things that we've always done. We were talking about wine dinners the other day, and wine and food, two of my favorite things in the world, but one of my least favorite things is going to a dinner with 50 people sitting at round tables where a sales rep from, whatever vineyard comes in and talks about how great the family is. Everybody eats, you have an opportunity to buy the wine and that's it. You're not learning anything. It's not interactive. And I think that's the other thing that we've got to do in this business is pivot to become more interactive. I think that we almost need to double down on service because people need to feel that they're getting something for what they pay their money for. And you can do so much with wine and food. So when I say that the people that are going to make it are the ones that really be the people that go over the top, do their research. And, I give a lot of hats off to Elliot here in town because he does research what he does before he does it and he executes it well. And I think that, for me, it's like when I walk into one of his places, I'm like, this is what I would like to see, and, if you put service on top of all those things, yeah, it's more expensive, but it's totally worth it. Even if you don't get to do it as often. So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of places around town that you like, outside of obviously the club, what are some of your local favorites? Well,
my favorite restaurant burned down.
I know.
So, let's see. I really still like Oren a whole lot.
Oren is great.
I think Oren is fantastic.
Chef Matt is amazing.
I think Amelia is great.
Yes.
I love Basque. It is
I do too.
Basque is probably my favorite place to just go hang out, eat, and drink with friends because the tapas style thing, it works there. It's the only time it's ever worked in this town.
Yes.
And Amelia does a great job with it. So I think that she, hats off to her. Another place that I really, really like to go, I think Bull in the Alley is great. I really like Bar Sarah over at Utica Square.
I haven't been there yet.
That's become a really cool lunch spot for me, and I love the food. It's just a nice atmosphere. But we've got a bunch of fun stuff coming too. I think that we're going to see in the next 6-9 months that D'Alessandro's needs to be mentioned as well because I think that that's the best Italian we have in town and the only non-Italian that we have in town.
The non-Italian.
Yeah. So so shout out to Sonny, but no, I think it's got to be my generation X and yours, the millennials, we're all experience-based people. So going to dinner, I can cook that. I say this all the time. I'm like, I can cook a steak at home. So if I want to go out, I want to do something.
That should be noted, actually. I will say this, Jared. As for many years that you've spent in the front of the house, you're a pretty good cook.
It's funny when I go home, what I do to relieve stress is cook, play guitar, listen to music,
and drink wine.
Or read and drink wine. Yeah. So, but cooking has been, I work with all these guys that are, really the best people at what they do. Like Bill, Trevor, Trey, all these guys. They're fantastic. I mean, these guys are pros.
Right.
What I can do at home is limited, but I have a lot of fun learning.
Yeah.
And I get to be around this, so why not absorb some of it?
Right. Absolutely.
One of the things that I haven't talked to Bill about this because he's skiing, but when he gets back, I wanted to see if he wanted to swap places for 30 days.
30 days might be stretching it.
I would go to the kitchen and learn some stuff.
30 days might be stretching it.
I don't know that the front of the house would like to see that, but no, I when you're around this much talent, you've got to soak some of it up. So,
right.
And if you're not going to eat well and drink well, then
what's the point of living?
I'm not sure.
No,
I'm not sure.
So we talked about some of your current favorites, but if you had a time machine or if we could revive some, let's say one bar, one restaurant that used to be in existence, what would it be? What would yours be?
We'll put Lowood and Hodges aside just because that's recent.
Right. Lowood and Hodges aside. Also, I'm going to even say this. You can't pick Mexico.
Well, no, Mexico is mine. And I had plans one of these days to do that again.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know when, but Mexico will reopen one day.
That's awesome.
I made a promise to myself when
You've
we closed
heard it here, folks.
that I would do it again when I had the time. So,
okay.
And I look forward to that. But no, my favorite bar that closed, man, geez, probably Vintage on 18th Street.
Yes.
That was probably my favorite place to hang out.
Well, I mean, we should know that Vintage is downtown. However, I mean, it did lose a lot of, it's just something completely different.
It's a different concept now. But the original concept was really, really cool. And I just loved that bar. Restaurant. Oh, man. Soche. I mean, I've got to say it. It was just... we were such young idiots, but having,
agreed.
Everybody was just having the time of their life back then.
Maybe you and I should open up Soche.
It would probably run better. So
yes,
no,
it was a lot of fun.
That one, I really miss places like the Bistro in Brookside. I mean, I know there's still one out south, but it's not the same. I miss the Garlic Rose.
Garlic Rose, I will say, that place, the charm in there and the fireplace and it was just amazing.
Our boy Josh did a great job with that, and
I love the Garlic Rose.
And that place didn't close because it failed.
No,
we'll just leave it at that. But I think that that would be one of my favorites that is gone. Would be Soche or Garlic Rose probably.
What was the place on Brookside that all of the industry folks used? Not Brookside, on Cherry Street.
Well, there was Chow on Brookside. Cherry Street, we would all go to Camarelli's.
Camarelli's,
yeah.
Okay.
If Camarelli's were to open back up again, I don't know that I would go because I have too many skeletons buried in that closet. So
right.
I don't need to go relive anything.
Well, I just remember it had closed right when I had made the transition from working out south to working downtown and hanging in and around all of the quote lifers that we talk about today that are opening all their own restaurants and doing their own thing. That was right. I think I started hanging out with you all right on literally the last night. And I went there and hung out on the last night that it was open. And that was it. That was my only experience.
Camarelli's was the birthplace of a lot of dreams.
Yes. It was heavily attended by industry folks.
That was where we all hung out, that and Drake's. But I remember having conversations with people that own restaurant groups now. And, my friends that I work in the industry, and we're like, we're going to do this. We're going to open a restaurant one of these days. And, I think that if you're talking about the Tulsa restaurant scene, you've got to talk about Robert Merrifield and the Polo Grill too.
Oh, for sure.
Because Robert, I think that I relate to how he ran service at the Polo Grill for so long. And I still admire that they keep that up. And Robert, that place has just been open for 40 years now. And it's still one of the best examples of what a great restaurant can be over a series of decades.
Mm-hmm.
And Robert has been a very good friend to me over the years, and I value him a whole lot too. So
yeah.
But
well, now it is time for me.
Rapid fire?
No, not rapid fire, but I do want to know your pro tip. And whilst this, podcast has been short-lived, this is the 3rd episode. However, you were the first person to give any kind of potential front of the house tip. So I'm very intrigued and interested to hear what your pro tip would be.
For front of the house, what would be my pro tip?
Oh, well, if you were going to give a back the house tip, I'm open for that too.
I think that if I were to go, I always look at a pro tip as something you would go back and tell yourself 15, 20 years ago.
Sure.
And for me, it would be to calm down, enjoy it. And, this is all it's a show. We're not doing brain surgery here. Enjoy it, have fun with it. And if this is truly your passion, don't settle for doing less just to make other people happy.
Right. It's very interesting, your choice of words there. I'm going to say that those exact words of this is just a show and it's not brain surgery were uttered to me on countless occasions by Chef Paul.
Mm-hmm.
He told me...
I probably stole it from him and I just don't remember it.
Yeah, he would tell us that all the time. And it's not rocket science. You're just...
and don't get me wrong. This is I think that being a restaurant worker is actually rated 2 steps underneath like being a neurosurgeon as far as the amount of stress that you go through.
Stressful, yes, absolutely.
And so not to discredit that or neurosurgeons, but the mechanics of what we do is very difficult, but we also have to remember, A, we're not doing, brain surgery here, and B, we're just cooking food and, pouring drinks. I mean, so let's not take ourselves too seriously either.
Right.
And when I learned that, I became a better coworker, a better manager. And I think the sooner that you can figure out that everything is a team game in this, and that it's all about you winning the day.
Right.
And that's what I would tell myself as a pro tip. So.
Well, I think that's a good place to wrap. I think that those words, if you're listening, the young generation, I think that's a good place to end things. And I've enjoyed myself immensely sitting here talking with you.
This has been fantastic.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
I've when you told me that you were going to do this, I was going to have my feelings hurt if I didn't get invited.
Well, of course you're going to be invited. And I hope that you'll, in the future come back and we can chat some more.
Absolutely. I have multiple personalities, so we can, you can talk to any of them.
Right. All right. Well, thank you so much. And we'll have to get the girls together soon.
Thank you. Let's do it.
All right. Adios, friends.